English 431. Let me say first and foremost, how much I'm learning from you all in perusal. You're doing a fantastic job. I know I've said this before. Maybe I'm a broken record on my praise for you, but I mean it. I feel like I have really deep and heartfelt conversations sometimes just in going through the article with you and experiencing how you are reading, what stands out in your mind, and what sense you're making about the main claims in the articles we read. In some senses, the kind of readings that we've done in this course will draw to an end with this week's perusal, which we just got done with. Last week's perusal, which we just got done with Soliday's article on course embedded tutors. What I'm hoping you find interesting there is that this is the third possible way that we can imagine mentoring and mentorship functioning in our English programs. You will recall that what we started off with was an explication and a discussion of writing centers, and you did a paper on being tutored. The tutorial is collaborative in the sense that it is one tutor and one writer working together to make that writer's draft clearer, more to the point, and so on. But there's a power differential that exists in that people are not writing together so much as kind of concentrating on one piece of writing and trying to figure out where it needs to go next. The other kinds of writing and revision that we might see come in collaborative groups. It's a different kind of model of mentorship, where in one kind of 2-hour or maybe 1-hour block, a group of 10 students meets to flesh out ideas in different kinds of ways about what they're going to do at different stages of the writing process. Your internships with these mentors has shown you a full range of ways in which a writing process might go. Writing processes are individualistic in the sense that we may get to the same goal, but we may reach them in different ways. These writing groups, of course, are attached to a particular space, the English 130p jumbo, but they're outside of that space, by which I mean they function as a kind of an outside but alongside space for that bigger class. Although all the students come from that bigger class, the idea of the writing group meeting separately outside of that main classroom space is that they can function at least semi-autonomously. They can figure out what they need to do. They can make decisions about their own writing. They can look at other people's drafts, and they can perhaps raise questions that might be uncomfortable to ask in the bigger space. That's at least the way that it would be in a face-to-face semester. Now, this third kind of mentorship exists in a traditional classroom, let's just say capped at 25 to 30, with a traditional professor or teacher or TA, and with a mentor actually being in that class. Now, as we saw in this article, what's kind of interesting there is to imagine the role that a mentor could play observing and participating in other students' learning, and perhaps being that guide at the side at the very moment when writing projects begin. Now, you might say to yourself, I've already taken English 130, right? I've already taken a composition course. I don't really need to take another composition course, and nobody's asking you to, right? If you were to be in the kind of space that Mary Soliday is talking about, you would be almost perfect enactment of what Lev Vygotsky called the more capable peer. That is, the person who has additional insights or expertise or experience with college level writing, who could then serve as the best student in the class, who could serve as the question asker, who could serve as the conversation starter, shoot your hand up into the air, who could serve as a guide to getting started with different kinds of drafts the students might be writing in that class. And you think to yourself, well, now why do we even need a person like that? Why can't the professor or the TA function in that role, right? But there are 30 people in this class. And 30 people is far more than there should be in a writing class if we want to work effectively in small groups and if we want to work effectively with each student, right? 20 would be my ideal cap. But 30 students then, it could be really interesting to think about how a mentor and a teacher craft a pedagogy together so that they don't just kind of divide the class in half. You take 15, I'll take 15, but actively work to create groups of students who share writing with other people and actively can move around the room, the metaphorical room this semester, but they can move around the room and work at the point of need with different students as they're thinking through ways to get more words on the page. Now, you saw in Mary Soliday's article that sometimes this doesn't work too well. That is, that there is role confusion that might exist between what the professor thinks the mentor's job is and what the mentor thinks the mentor's job is. We got plenty of examples of that. But the other reason that I gave you that article that could be interesting for us to talk about in future weeks is another form of role confusion, which I have mentioned before. An ongoing, that is to say, a recurring issue in English 431 is that very role confusion where tutors, mentors, and so on know what the role of a student feels like and increasingly know what the role of a professor looks like. But that gray area in the middle, tutor, mentor, writing guide, more capable peer, and so on, functions as a gray area where things get a little muddled and a little confused. We start to get to it with different kinds of readings we've done this semester that articulate that sometimes you are teaching, sometimes you are listening, sometimes listening is teaching, and sometimes you are working with, sometimes you're actively collaborating with, helping to build sentences together, and sometimes you're just trying to ask the next right question. So, 3 different models then of how writing mentorship works. The tutor, the writing group leader, and now the course embedded mentor. I gave you 3, of course, for the reasons that I've spoken about, but also because we're offering some opportunities next semester in spaces like this. Dr. Kim Jackson is teaching a course called English 634 right now, and she has a cohort of about 10 students or so, about 6 or 7 of whom may go on to the interview and want to get their own section of English 130. In order that we advance the goals of writing mentorship, what we are doing, and in order to solve several other structural problems that I won't go into at this point, what we're doing is we're building some English 130 courses that have course embedded tutors. Now, this would be an opportunity for you all to work 4 or maybe 5 hours a week at almost $15 an hour, but working with a TA who may be teaching for the first time in a space where 30 students could be meeting face-to-face, online, or some combination. The goal, as with other semesters we've done a program like this, is to bring you and the TA together and to provide you with ideas, questions, heuristics, whatever you want to call them, so that you can start to be thinking about what your course might actually look like. And it would be partially your course, although you wouldn't be the instructor of record. You'd be, in some senses, working with that TA on the learning goals for that course and figuring out what to do with students on a regular basis and trying out different strategies for getting them to revise their writing. Sounds exciting. At least it does for me. I hope it does for you too, because we have some opportunities and we'll be coming out with some information about applying for those positions in the next week, I believe. For now, let me offer you a couple of words of wisdom about this week in English 431. You will see we're right in the middle of week 11. Well, the beginning of week 11, writing about writing groups. And you know, it's April. and it's the middle of April, and it's feeling like, oh boy, this semester is cooked. Pull it out of the oven because it is done, overdone, well done. But we're going to persist on. In different kinds of ways, I am feeling like we are going to end something this week, and then we're going to turn our attention to the final bit of the semester, which is what you feel you've learned so far. Big reflective chunk that can show me what you feel you've learned this semester in a very low stakes way. So what you see this week is this. By Wednesday, I hope that what you can do is submit a draft of your writing group observation in Google Docs to our current site, and we'll workshop each other's drafts. What that means basically is that once again, we'll be going into English 431's current community, and I have now opened up a space for the writing group observation paper right here. Make sure that when you write it in Google Docs, you actually write it in Google Docs, and you change the access, the sharing settings, so that anybody can get to it. Anyone with the link can edit would be the best. Second best would be anyone with the link can comment. You all did a great job of that last time, so I'm not really worried about it. What are you writing this paper on? Let's remember, this is a writing group observation paper in which what you have done, I hope by this point, is that you have observed another writing group and you've taken some pretty extensive notes on what kinds of things happened, right? You are looking for demonstrations of learning, describing what you see and hear in detail about what went on during that time you observed, what people did, what people said, how people wrote, and what got accomplished. Okay? But in particular, what I hope that you are doing is that after you have done that observation, you have said to yourself, now, what is the thing that I could really target in this essay to illustrate the kinds of learning that went on during this hour or hour and a half? What happened? How would I describe it in terms of Mark Hall's sheet of valued practices? I want your papers to dial in and to focus on one of these practices. That's your paper. Addressing writers' concerns, or focus only on a few specific issues to work on in a single consultation, or setting reasonable expectations and negotiating with the writer what to work on and why. Now, what are you doing with that? You are using that valued practice to describe the kinds of learning that went on during that observation in terms of that valued practice, and perhaps comparing to the kinds of things that occur in your regular writing group. So what you see right here are the ways in which each of those valued practices might break out into some sub-questions or other kinds of heuristic thought experiments that you could play out as you write that would help you illustrate deeply what happened during your observation. So for example, if creating opportunities for the writer to demonstrate learning by talking, practicing writing strategies and problem solving, then what do writers learn during this workshop group? Well, if learning is doing, then what do you see the writer do that suggests learning? What do the mentors or students do to prompt or initiate that learning in the writer? That's the kind of sub-questioning that we could get from that particular strategy right there. Prioritize global concerns before local. Since no consultation can address every concern, groups must negotiate together with the writers what to work on and in what order. They must decide what's most important, what's less significant. How do they make that determination? And with what consequences for the writer's involvement in learning? For this observation report, you'll need to understand that you have a clear understanding of the scholarly conversation about the difference between higher order concerns and lower order concerns. Okay, something we haven't talked about a lot, but higher order concerns, content, organization, lower order concerns, things like punctuation and grammar. That doesn't mean they're not important. It just means that in different kinds of ways, content is supreme. The content of a piece of writing is always more important than its instantiation in words. Practically, what does that mean? If something says something really important, if a piece of writing says something really important, we can excuse the fact that it's grammatically imprecise. That stuff can be tuned up later. But if something is grammatically precise and yet says nothing, then we're going to have to throw that paragraph out. Okay. So in different kinds of ways, then, I'm hoping that these are the things that you are thinking about as you are starting to write this draft, that you are taking extensive notes on the observation that you conducted. You are choosing one, only one of these value practices. And then that you are writing a paper that will give us a sense of what you saw and how it compares to your group in terms of that value practice. You're not just saying this, mentor was good at her job or not good at her job. You are making a central idea or argument about the session that you observed, trying to help us see the learning that took place and how, if you think it's relevant, course readings or other kinds of things might apply. So what does this mean in terms of our tentative schedule? I'm hoping what you will do by Wednesday is submit a draft of this document. And then we will get in there and we'll start to read. I may poke in and say hi and read a little bit and give you some questions to think about. I hope that you all do the same. Remember, one of the things that we know about peer review is that it helps the person who is reading as much as, or maybe even more than, the person who's writing. How does that work? Because of course, like I said before, that reader says, oh, wow, that's a great idea. I can use that in my paper. In short, there's research and theory behind this. Trust me. So then what that means is, please attend your internship, but then please revise your writing group observation in that same draft. And I will use the links in week 11 to respond to your drafts sometime this weekend. I really enjoy reading them. I usually rip through them and I'll probably have comments back to you by Monday or Tuesday. No big deal. Fun to read, interesting to hear how things are going, and interesting just to see how other people are experiencing these writing groups. Then, very briefly, I will say we get into the reflective portion of the course. We have 4 weeks, literally, to be thinking about what we have learned in this course. In the midst of all of the trauma of this semester and last, in the midst of an ongoing pandemic that may have hurt you or affected you in any number of different ways, including economically or with family and friends and neighbors. It's important for us to take a step back and take a look at the kinds of things that we've done this semester as evidence of our own learning. What do we feel that we have learned, and what do we feel that maybe we want to know more about? The final readings we'll do are actually going to be in Google Currents, and you all will find some articles that kind of scratch an itch for you. You all will find some articles that maybe are on something that we didn't cover in English 431, and yet you still wanted to know something about. This could take you far afield into theories of learning or online engagement or trauma-inflected education. But it also could be something more specific about the kinds of things about writing, tutoring, learning, and mentoring that we just didn't get around to enough. So that'll be fun because we can share these articles with each other, we can learn from them, and then we can write about, kind of what we've done in the class and what we want to know more about in the future. For now, I will say you all are doing great work once again. And please contact me if you have any questions or concerns, and we'll take it from there. Thanks.